So Alison was showing 3 films that you were part of throughout the week, and today we're going to talk about Corporate Responsibility Pledge, which you guys did. And I was just going to ask first, like, how did the collaboration kind of happen between you guys that you ended up with this project? And was it sort of like one of you came together with an idea, or was it a natural process? How did the idea come about?
How did we do this? So like way back in the beginning, I was at this like social media marketing workshop or something, and was like seated next to a few people, and one of them was this woman who was really cool, and we were just chatting, and I was like, oh, I make digital abstract art for like album art and that kind of thing, just like, you know, shooting the breeze. And she's like, oh, I should connect you with my brother who's a really cool electronic musician, and I don't know about really cool. No, he's great. And so then, we just connected from there, and we just like vibed and worked on his first album cover. There was a sticker. It was dope. And then when I had a show at Emerson Contemporary like a year ago, I had him, it was all about like lit art and stuff. I had him play live at the closing reception. And then I worked on another album cover for him. And then we're like, this is really good. We should keep doing this. And then Doug, take it from there.
Well, I think that's, I was always drawn to Allison's sort of voice as an artist. And this whole idea that she often recycles or uses sort of found materials or things that were maybe from an advertisement or have somehow already been through some type of like marketing scheme or process. And I really love that sort of aesthetic of her art. And in my music, I do a lot of recycling of sounds and a lot of sort of found sound type electronic music. So I was like, oh my God, we have to eventually do something where we're both combining our like artistic interests and do something more formal. You know, it was sort of like a client, relationship, as we're doing these things. But as we're making these album covers and as Allison was designing these, I just like fell in love with her work ethic and the way that she's so open to just revision after revision. And I'm a nightmare. I'm just a nightmare to work with. And I'm just like, well, can we change this color? Can we change this? Can we alter this? Can we change this? And just so responsive to that. And she can hold her own water as well in the idea that she's going to bring something to the table. So when the Unheard Of Ensemble, which is a New York-based new music ensemble, when they had a call for collaborative works for video and live performers, I was like, oh, I gotta ask Allison. We've got to do this. We finally have to do something creative together.
That's really cool. Just touching on, because obviously in this video there is a lot of like, I'm assuming like adverts and like little bits of found footage from like the 60s, and it gives it this kind of like, I mean, it's a very nostalgic feel. I mean, even though it's a time that I never experienced, country never been to, but like, just what was the sort of process about, I mean, sort of choosing this footage and like reworking it into the piece?
Yeah, so Doug, if you want to talk like a tiny bit about maybe like the concept of the music, and I can talk about how I like did the art around it, because it was a little bit call and response.
Yeah, I think the musical idea, the pure musical idea was have a piece where something is very structured for the musicians to play. So the Unheard Of Ensemble are clarinet, piano, cello, and violin. So and they normally perform music that is like just specifically written and extremely long. And so I thought to myself, what if I wrote a piece where super organized and super rigorous, and then there was just like a jam section, just a free where they could decide what they wanted to play. And so that was the original concept of the music. And when I started thinking about extra musical things, I started thinking about this relationship of sort of organized society versus free society. And this idea of you know, how do corporations and how do larger businesses affect these free parts of our lives? I grew up a lot playing in the woods, kind of just like time on my own, time spent on my own. And, you know, especially living in Boston now and in Somerville, I see less and less of that. And that opens free space. And so I'm always kind of curious what that relationship is. So and I think, you know, Allison and I had a few conversations about, you know, doing corporate work, doing corporate art and sort of those concepts. So I kind of then, like Allison said, it was a call and response. And I sort of said, okay, here's the musical idea. Here's this corporate responsibility pledge idea. What do you think?
And I was like, so I loved Doug's like kind of, yeah, like there's this like tension of like, it's like kind of classical, but it's modern. And there's like really interesting tempos and the sections are like very well defined. But there was like a lot of room to play and it wasn't too didactic where I was like, okay, this section is like clearly about this and I have to match it exactly. Like there was a lot of freedom for us to express ourselves within that framework. And so just to like step back a sec. So in terms of like the work that I do, I generally take either like vintage material from like my own collection or photos that I take or like my past art and I process everything through apps on my phone. And then like I will assemble it or edit it like using like real software, so to speak. But a lot of it happens in this like very like intimate space that's like a little bit unconventional. And my history is like I've worked as a marketing advertising copywriter like in my like day-to-day, like kind of like a recovering copywriter and trying to do more art for art's sake. So there's I have this kind of love-hate relationship where like if I see a really good ad, I'm like, oh, that's so well written, but I'm also like recoiling at like the fakery of it. And I'm like, I can see right through it because I've been behind the scenes. So I'm like, oh, I know exactly what like who they're trying to reach, what they're trying to say, what the real story is. Mm-hmm. So for this, I went to like a lot of, I got like a lot of archival footage. Like I am like very into like, you know, mid-century kind of stuff, which for me is like this sweet spot of like, there's this idealism about industry and commercialization where it's like, oh, this is the future. Like this is progressive. Like we're all going to have like everything we made of like some like synthetic tri-blend and it's going to be like space age and amazing. And like as like artificial and new as possible is like, you know, like the elite experience. But it's like there's something that's like still kind of quaint and sweet about it because I don't think it was intended to be like world destroying. Like it really was like, oh, this will make like your life better as a housewife. And you're like, oh, I do like that rayon blend. Like, yes, that is great for my ironing board cover. Like this does dry faster. So, so I went through and found like office footage and a lot of like old tech computer stuff, environmental materials, just like industrial shorts where it's like just doing like a factory tour or something that's like not meant to be, it's more documentary than like even advertising. And then kind of gathered all that up and sort of like, the idea behind it was kind of like this like gestalt sort of where it's like it tells a story that like has a point of view, but in itself is like holier than thou to be like capitalism bad, like war bad, we should be like living on a commune. But instead it was like the first part is like the idealism of like this is what progress can bring and like this is like your happy nuclear family and like, oh, you can have so many shoes and it's great and like, oh, look at this factory, like this is like the shining mark of progress. And then the middle part, which is like the looser part, is about like more like nature footage, but it's like highly processed. So it's like, it's beautiful and flowing, but there's also like this kind of like sinister edge to it. Like I was telling Doug, there's a section of it that is water that's processed, but people are like, oh, I love that oil. And I'm like, no, like, but like it's water, but like I made it look so gnarly. Yeah. But like the fact that like we're so conditioned to seeing like toxic spills that's where our mind automatically went, as opposed to like, what's up with that water? We're like, oh no, like another industrial disaster. Whoops. Yeah. So Yeah, and then there is a part that involves an oil rig, and that is like the oldest footage from like I want to say like 19 teens or 20s or something. And like you can't really tell that's how old it is because like so there's like this kind of weird interplay of like there's vintage elements. The stuff that looks really old is the stuff that they were trying to make look really futuristic. That looks really dated, and the stuff that like is more basic is stuff that's like we're still that's like that is like recognizable to us today. Like there's like a faucet, and I'm like, oh, that's the faucet of my current sink, but like I know that that car is like way old.
Yeah.
So just like this kind of, and I think the last part was sort of like the convergence of that, where it's like, yeah, like which we're trying, and like we were messing up, and it's all integrated, and like it's probably going to be like even more of a disaster, but like it's kind of beautiful, and like in my own way, like I am complicit in that. Like I made this whole thing like thanks to these technological advances. Like I was able to get these clips because people had like able to take like film footage, and then I was able to download it and then use my smartphone app to process it. So it's not like I'm like, you know, holier than thou, like in this like crunchy, you know, high position, but I'm also not like, yeah, everything that's convenient for me is totally great and fine and justified. So like there is this like murkiness, but there's like this mix of like affection for like these old ideals, and then this like really cynical, like, you know, like practicality of like, whoops.
Yeah.
And you know, that's something Allison brought from the initial draft of the video. So we did several drafts, and even the initial draft, it had that really nuanced narrative where I think I was coming at it like sort of like an angry teenager. Like I was just like, corporations are bad, like, like take them down, like whatever. And I thought that's kind of what I was saying is like with the music is that the organized sections are fun for a little bit, but then they get so organized and so repetitive that it almost sounds like a record skipping. And so I brought that initial idea, but what I loved about even just the first cut of what Allison did was that it was nuanced in saying, well, yeah, some of the things that corporations do affect the communities they live in a really negative way. Other things are great, but then I love the nuance that you brought into it that, well, we're kind of actually complicit in it in some way too, or we're sort of part of the problem and we're sort of benefiting from it as well. So I really think it was great that she brought this sort of grayness into something that I was originally very black and white about. So
I think it was something both of us found when we watched it was, this like kind of really nice duality that neither like wasn't super preachy. You guys weren't there just being like, corporate America is bad and we're angry.
Yeah.
Like there was this really nice like you said, like murkiness of, it's very beautiful, like a lot of this like glitch effect you have, and the music is jarring but also super happy. Like we both found this like really really upbeat tempo, and the sort of chaos but also organized nature of it makes it like there is this rose tinted glasses effect, but also you are slightly uncomfortable throughout the whole thing because of it, which is like a really sort of like pleasant and disturbing situation for the viewer.
That's such a good way to put it. And that's like that's kind of like, that's my goal with my art is like even if it's colorful and happy and it brings me joy, like I think it's kind of inescapable. Like I can't make anything that's like purely like sunshine. Like it's got to be like sunshine in nuclear winter, or like there's like some poison to like the candy. I don't know.
It's like an Andy Kaufman kind of stand-up act, sort of like Allison, I believe you have one piece where it's similar to the Frosted Flakes logo. And so when you look at the piece originally, you're like, oh, Frosted Flakes, I remember them from my youth. Like those were great. And that was a great cereal to have as a kid. But she's altered it in minor ways, or she's changed the slogan. So then you start to feel that uncomfortableness where you're having that wave of nostalgia and saying, oh, this is from my youth. And then you're like, but wait, now what's going on here? Something's different, something's wrong. And seeing that in her own art, I was like, oh, that would be so exciting to put some music to that, or have a soundtrack to accompany that awkwardness, right? Yeah.
Oh, it was really great. Well, yeah, to round up, because we're running out of time, just the final question we've been asking everyone we interview is, what have you guys kind of been watching during the lockdown period? Like, is there anything you've been binging? Doesn't matter how rubbish it is or how hype it is.
Well, I have probably the most diametrically opposed ones. I'm currently rewatching the Watchmen series, which it was on HBO, and it's fantastic. It talks about Black Wall Street, and it really addresses racism in this country in a very, I think, intelligent way. And at the same time, it's a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And then when that gets too intense, I'm actually rewatching Cougar Town, so
Hey!
which is a horrible show.
No, it's well paced.
It's well paced. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I find it very comforting.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'm actually experiencing that same duality where like I just finished watching Snowpiercer, which is like intense and like you know, has like a lot of the themes from our video actually, where it's like social injustice and like corporate crap has led to apocalypse. And then on the flip side, I'm like sprinkling in some Monk episodes where it's like it's like old school, and it's like there's something that's just like so, especially now where I'm looking, where like he has like OCD and like everything, he's like he needs like wipes and stuff, and I'm like so prescient. But like at the time that was like over the top, and you know, and people give him a hug or something and he's like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know, like I'm experiencing that same thing. I'm like, get away from me. So it's like this weird, like pre-pandemic, it wouldn't have seemed so like quaint and nostalgic, but now in this like new era, it's like the 50s. Like it's just like this weird, distant, idealistic past. So it's like, it's comforting because I'm like, oh, it's like the old country. But at the same time, like it's also like a super annoying show because he's just like a really unlikable character. And so like the whole time I'm just like yelling at him and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, how do they make such an unlikable main character? And yet I come back and just keep watching it. So I don't know. There's the poison with the candy, man. I'm just like torturing myself. It's just, I'm always uncomfortable even when I'm trying to enjoy myself.
Your aesthetic wrong. I love it. Okay, well, cheers, guys. Those were
Thank you so much.